who knows what's going to come out of Gaza?
But isn't that the exact logic that justifies America bombing the shit out of Afghanistan after 9/11?
It doesn't justify it, but it explains it.
4 Islamist terror attacks in a few weeks. The host asks the obvious question. Mehdi Hassan answers with Islamophobia, tweets from congressmen, and Gaza. Watch what happens when the host stops accepting the framing. He asks why Russians and Ukrainians don't blow up bars. He asks whether the same logic justifies bombing Afghanistan. Every time the answer lands, Hassan reaches for another subject. This is a masterclass in a talking point meeting, a question it cannot survive. Let's get into it.
In the time that we've been here, there have been 4, I don't know if you necessarily describe them as, maybe I think they were 4 terrorist attacks committed by what we understand to be an Islamist. Do you see that as part of, you talked about blowback, do you see that as part of the blowback, or is there another reason this seems to be happening with increasing regularity in the United States?
Yes, a good question. It's very worrying. It's one of the things that keeps me up at night. I think the more we see that, the more we're going to see real fractured relations in communities. Islamophobia right now is already off the charts in the Republican Party. They're looking for any excuse. I don't know if you've seen the tweets from Andy Ogle saying Muslims are not part of American society.
I didn't see that, no.
This is a Republican congressman who said Muslims are not welcome in America.
And there's another
not
one.
Islamists.
And
not
there's
immigrants.
another one he keeps tweeting.
There's a guy called Randy Fine.
Yeah.
He said if I had to choose between dogs and Muslims, I'd choose dogs.
Yeah.
So there's some real, I mean, if you talk to Muslims who lived here after 9/11, I didn't, I moved here in 2015, but if you talk to Muslims in my wife's family, friends of mine, they will say the Islamophobia now is much worse than after 9/11. After 9/11, George Bush went to a mosque and said Islam's peace. Donald Trump would never do that. And so in a climate of Islamophobia, of course, Muslims, any self-identified Muslim who carries out an act of terror against a synagogue or against a university or whatever it is of course, it's going to be morally wrong and a criminal act. But it's going to be a real disaster for community relations, for the political debate, for some of these cultural issues we talked about.
Ask about 4 Islamist attacks in 3 weeks, and the first word back is Islamophobia. Not the attacks, the reaction to the attacks. Hassan spends 90 seconds on 2 congressmen's tweets before he touches what the host actually asked. Then comes the pivot to George Bush at a mosque. The host asked why this keeps happening. He got a survey of Republican rhetoric instead. Watch how often that move repeats.
I don't know what is motivating all these people. It's very hard to say. The guy who attacked the synagogue in Michigan recently, there's reporting that his 2 brothers were killed, their kids were killed.
They were 2 Hezbollah people,
That's
right?
what some people say not. We don't have a confirmation. Different media outlets. Some say Hezbollah, some say no. We don't know. But clearly he may have been, it sounds like he was pissed, right, about what happened in Lebanon. That doesn't justify what he did, but that sounds like there. There was another attack that same day or week in Virginia on a college campus from a guy who had been linked to ISIS, who had been released from prison. Again, don't know, because people say he was mentally ill. Muslims, we always joke that we don't get to be mentally ill, right? It's only the white mass shooter who gets to be mentally. Muslims, we never have any mental illness in our community. We're just all Islamists. But look, this is a country with a lot of violence, right? Gun violence is a thing of norm. Mass shooters are. So the night we went to war with Iran, there was an attack on an Austin bar. Yes. There was a mass shooting. That also is believed, some people are reporting, I haven't seen.
Well, he was wearing a t-shirt saying property of Islam.
And he had a flag, an Iranian flag, whatever. So there's some links.
Yeah.
But when that story first came out, most people just shrugged and said, oh, another mass shooting in a bar. It's just normal in this country. And then you throw in the political or religious angle, then it becomes a big news story.
I think...
Watch the host cut in. 2 Hezbollah people, right? And suddenly the reporting is unconfirmed. Conflicting outlets. Nobody knows. But 3 sentences later, Hassan knows exactly what the attacker felt about Lebanon. The certainty arrives when it helps. It vanishes when it doesn't. Then comes the Austin bar shooting, a shirt reading property of Islam. An Iranian flag. His takeaway is that America shrugged. The host's question was never about America's attention span.
To be fair, and I mean, your point about mentally ill, I haven't heard a Muslim be described as someone who had real mental illness.
No, there's a famous Family Guy meme.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. But on the other hand, I also think that if you have a white guy and there's any connection to white supremacy, that also gets amplified, right?
Sometimes.
So when a mass...
If you look at the studies, actually, not really. It's like 8-to-1 ratio of like how much we talk about the motivations and religion of a Muslim shooter versus a white shooter. There's been a lot of studies done.
Well, the point I was going to make is if someone is wearing a t-shirt saying property of Islam, or if someone is a member of ISIS, or if someone expresses allegiance to...
I'm agreeing with you. It's bad for Muslims
Well,
in
let me
Islam.
just finish. So if someone expresses those views, it would be natural for us to talk about that.
Yeah.
Likewise, if someone expressed white supremacist beliefs while committing a shooting, like the guy in New Zealand or whatever.
Or the people who attacked the Capitol, who Donald Trump pardoned on day one. Many of them wore Camp Auschwitz t-shirts, carried Confederate flags.
Right, and people focused on that. So,
And Trump pardoned them.
and well, hold on, but you're derailing my argument.
I apologize.
I'm not a Trump advocate, right?
I apologize.
So my point is, the reason I asked you about this is obviously something that we have had to deal with in Europe extensively.
Yes.
And it feels to me, I don't think it's being talked about in this way here in the US, but it feels to me like it's coming to the US.
The host makes a simple point. When a shooter wears the ideology, we talk about the ideology. Hassan answers with a statistic nobody can check, and then jumps to the Capitol riot and Trump's pardons. The host has to stop him mid-sentence. You're derailing my argument. That is the whole exchange in 5 words. Then the host lands the real question. Europe has lived this for 20 years. Now it is arriving here. Hassan's answer is next.
I worry that you may be right, especially...
And why is that? Like,
I mean, I don't want to make it all about blowback, because it's not. But you can't, I mean, correlation is not causation, but I was a MSNBC anchor for 3.5 years. I can count on, I did a 2 weekly shows. Sometimes I used to do a nightly show. I can count on one hand, the fingers on one hand, how many times I talked about ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Not because I was ignoring the story. It wasn't a big story. It went away. Look, we would stop talking about it. We were only talking about the far right and white supremacists because the FBI said that was the biggest threat to the homeland. We'd just seen an insurrection. We kept arresting nut jobs who wanted to, militia members who wanted to blow shit up, who thought COVID was a way of this government taking over, all of this stuff. Right? So I think people got complacent, certainly in my community, thinking, nobody thinks Muslims are terrorists anymore. There aren't any Muslim terrorists anymore. Now, as you say, there does seem to be an uptick. Is that to do with Donald Trump becoming president? Is that to do with the war in Gaza, the genocide in Gaza? I know we haven't talked about it today, but US intelligence warned Biden in year 1 of the genocide that this will be a generational recruiting event for Islamist and jihadist groups around the world. This will be a threat to the United States. Obviously, I don't need to be an intelligence member to say that. It's just common sense. If people spend 2 years watching a Gaza genocide, some people, some more unhinged people, some more extreme people will say, I want to take revenge. I want to blow.
Listen to what just happened. Hassan tells us he barely mentioned ISIS in 3 years of anchoring because it wasn't a big story. That is offered as proof the threat had gone away. Then the explanation arrives, and it is Gaza. 2 years of footage produce revenge. Notice the structure. The attacks are always downstream of something the West did. The host is about to test that theory with the cleanest possible counterexample.
Well, why is that? I mean, I don't see the same being done by Russians or Ukrainians who've also had to deal with various things, who might blame Americans for something or whatever. Why is that?
I'm not sure that's a good analogy. So, for example, Ukraine. I mean, why would a Ukrainian feel the need to go blow themselves up in Russia when they have an army that's fighting Russia and killing Russians?
America, they might say, America, didn't give us the help they need, or the Russians say, we're at war with you. Why doesn't that happen?
I think the analogy between America not supporting Ukraine as much as Ukraine, even though America has basically kept Ukraine alive, is not the same as America arming and funding a genocide in Gaza for 2.5 years on our phones.
Take the Russian example. The narrative in Russia, I know this because I have family and I follow what's happening in Russia. The narrative in Russia is we're at war with America. Yeah, I don't see Russians blowing themselves up or throwing nail bombs or shooting people in bars up and down America.
I think because they think that they can do the damage they're doing in Ukraine. I mean, this is the difference. And you could say the same thing about Jewish people and Israel. Well, they have an army that's bombing Gaza. Look, I'm not saying some crazy theory. This is something that's been testified to by history. Take Sri Lanka, for example. The people who invented suicide bombings were not Muslim. The Tamil Tigers perfected it as a mass weapon, right? That was people who believed they were under occupation by Sinhalese, right? So and Robert Pape, who is an expert on suicide terrorism, has talked about this, that there's a clear link between foreign occupations and foreign wars and suicide terrorism, in particular suicide terrorism. But look, is there a problem where certain Muslim groups are exploiting political conflicts? Yes, I spent 20 years opposing jihadists and Islamists and pointing out that there is no justification in Islam for this kind of violence. But, explaining something is not the same as justifying it. I don't justify what they do. I think it's reprehensible. But I understand how they work and the mindsets and how they, and this guy in Michigan is an example of that. I don't agree with what he did. He's probably mentally unbalanced. But, people say, well, what would you do if you lost your family? Well, I wouldn't go attack a synagogue. But that's people act in an unhinged way after tragedies happen in their lives. That's not to justify it. Is it going to get worse? I hope not. But, again, violence begets violence. We've seen that in Palestine. We've seen that with Hamas, right?
That question is the hinge of the whole conversation. Russians are told daily they are at war with America. Nobody is nail-bombing bars in Ohio. Hassan's answer is that they already have an army doing the damage, so the theory now needs a national army to explain why terror is absent. Then come the Tamil Tigers, a genuinely good example, and then straight back to Gaza. Explaining is not justifying, he says. Fine, the host is about to apply that rule in the other direction.
Who knows what's going to come out of Gaza?
But isn't that the exact logic that justifies America bombing the shit out of Afghanistan after 9/11?
It doesn't justify it, but it explains it.
Right.
It does. I mean, so if you ask me why did America bomb Afghanistan, I wouldn't come up with I wouldn't say it's for the Bible or Christianity. I would say they did it because they got attacked and they wanted to attack back and make a show of force and do whatever they want to do. Doesn't mean I justify it. I didn't agree with the war in Afghanistan, but I understand it. What we refuse to do with our opponents and our enemies, especially the Muslim ones, is try and understand the mindset. We don't try and understand why Iran's doing what it's doing, why Hamas is doing what it's doing, why Hezbollah's doing. You don't have to agree with it, but they're not all crazy people. They actually have their own strategy and but some people suggest, they're all just messianic people. You did say, Konstantin, so I'm going to bring this up because I watched you on Rogan. You did say on Rogan, my Iranian guests tell me there's a 12-ish Shia Islam and they're messianic and they want to bring about the end of the world. That's not true. I'm a Shia Muslim. I'm telling you, Shia Muslim is not messianic. I mean, it is messianic in that we expect a Messiah to come just like Christians. I'm Mahdi. But there's no evidence that Shias in Iran are trying to bring about the end of the world and that's why they want nuclear weapons. So that kind of thinking is not helpful.
There it is. The host takes Hassan's rule and aims it at Afghanistan. And Hassan has to say yes. It doesn't justify it, but it explains it. He cannot have the principle work in one direction only, and to his credit, he doesn't try. But watch what happens the second he loses that ground. He stops answering and starts prosecuting, reaching for a podcast clip about Shia Islam. The subject is no longer the attacks. The subject is now the host.
I was quoting specific people.
Yeah, they're wrong, I'm telling you.
Well, they're wrong. I'm only quoting them. And I think I made it clear that some people say that. I'm not, I think we had this conversation with someone else the other day. I'm not convinced of this idea that they want nuclear weapons and the first nuclear weapon they get, they're going to drop it on Tel Aviv. Insane. I'm not convinced about that. I think there are some people who...
By the way, Israel has nukes. Can I just remind, we haven't said that in this whole conversation. Israel illegally has nukes.
You keep throwing stuff in that's not...
No, but it's relevant to the conversation. It is relevant. Come on, we spent an hour, half of the talk about Iran's nuclear program. I forgot to point out to the viewers, Israel has nukes.
Mehdi, when we had Yossi Cohen, who was the former head of Mossad, I literally made a joke which exposed the fact that Israel has nukes. Of course, Israel, everyone knows Israel has nukes. No one denies it here, right? But what we've done here is we've derailed the conversation we're actually having. The point I was making is, I suspect Iran wants nuclear weapons for the same reason that any country would want them.
9 minutes, one question, and it never really got answered. 4 attacks in 3 weeks. The host asked why. What came back was Islamophobia, then congressional tweets, then MSNBC ratings, then Gaza, then the Tamil Tigers, then Israel's nuclear weapons. Every answer was true of somewhere else. The host applied Hassan's own rule to Afghanistan. It held. When he asked why Russians and Ukrainians don't do this, the answer was that they have armies. And when the ground got thin, the conversation turned to what the host said on a podcast. That is what a theory looks like when it runs out of road. Do you think the host exposed a real hole in the blowback argument, or did Hassan have the better of it? Drop your thoughts in the comments.